Thanks for joining us. I'm Lance Fieser. We begin with the controversy surrounding Wisconsin's new Secretary of State. Longtime Secretary of State Doug LaFollette abruptly resigned last week, just months into his 11th term. LaFollette had held the role since 1983. Governor Tony Evers quickly appointed former state treasurer Sarah Godlewski. Republican lawmakers questioned the move. They accused the governor of handing Godlewski the job as a reward for dropping out of the U.S. Senate race last fall and clearing the way for Mandela Barnes to win the Democratic nomination. Evers says he's barely talked to Doug LaFollette the past couple of years.
There was no collusion. He gave me a letter. He brought my office a letter saying, I'm sick of this stuff. He left. I appointed a completely competent person to do the work. And that's the end of that story.
Republicans introduced a joint resolution calling on the governor to call a special election to fill the Secretary of State role. It passed the Senate on Wednesday.
There is no justification for the governor's appointment other than aiding a political ally and providing her the benefit of a statewide incumbency for future elections. The voters of Wisconsin deserve to have their voices heard, and I hope the governor heeds this call for a statewide special election to elect Wisconsin's next Secretary of State.
This could really be a new day for Republicans in Wisconsin, letting voters have a say in things. That would mean fair maps. That would mean things like restoring Roe v. Wade, legalizing cannabis, expanding Badger Care. There are so many things we could work on together if that was the goal.
Godlewski says she was surprised by the appointment. She told the Associated Press that she was called to the governor's office on March 15th, 2 days before Evers announced LaFollette's resignation, and she had no idea what the governor wanted before he offered her that job. Well, joining me now is one of the authors of that joint resolution, Majority Leader Representative Tyler August. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, so first off, I just want to start with a simple question, which is why? Why present this joint resolution?
Well, I think that what happened the end of last week was a surprise to everybody. There's a lot of unanswered questions about the process, about what the governor knew, when he knew it. Even the Secretary of State's resignation letter wasn't even dated. It said what time the resignation was effective, but it did not even indicate what day it was delivered to the governor. So how long did the governor know that the Secretary of State was planning on leaving on March 17th? It was very curious that it was announced that the Secretary of State was leaving in the same release where they appointed a new Secretary of State. So the people of the state, I think when they voted for Doug LaFollette in November, which was a very close election, I think if they had known that he planned on only serving a couple of months, the election may have turned out differently. So that's in the past. We're here where we're at. But to think that we have 45 months left on this term and the voters have no say in who's going to hold that office, we just think is wrong. So we're calling on the governor to call a special election. And look, maybe the new Secretary of State wins that election, and we'll accept that. But the voters need to have the final decision on who's going to be in that office for the next 45 months.
Now, Governor Evers did say this week, he pointed out that he had made an appointment before. That's when he stepped into that governor's role. He said nobody complained at that point, and he said that state superintendent role, arguably, he called it more high profile than Secretary of State. So why this one, maybe, does it lead you to take some sort of action?
Well, I think this one is very surprising. When the voters voted for Tony Evers to be governor in 2018, they knew that if he won, he would have to step down as DPI secretary and appoint a new one. So this wasn't a big surprise. When he won the election in November, everybody knew when they voted for him that this would be what happened. The voters this last November did not know that the Secretary of State was going to leave less than 3 months into the term. So I think they're very different. And of course, the governor would say that it's a higher profile position because he used to have it. So of course he thinks it's a higher profile position. But the Secretary of State's office is in the line of succession to become governor if something were to happen to the others above that office. So this is a very important office from that respect, and the voters should be able to weigh in on that.
Do you have reason to believe there was any sort of collusion here, that this was in place before the election?
Well, look, I mean, it certainly raises a lot of questions. I think by doing a news dump on a Friday afternoon with something of this magnitude, it certainly makes me wonder what type of situation was in place potentially before the primary. I mean, remember the new Secretary of State, Sarah Godlewski, she dropped out of the U.S. Senate race partially because she couldn't even get the support of her own party for a statewide race. And yet now you have a governor appointing her to a statewide position when she didn't even have the support of her own party last summer. So there's a lot of unanswered questions here, one of which really needs to be when did the governor know that this was going to happen? And it's all very suspect in my opinion.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit here. Speaker Voss unveiled a bill that would provide some exceptions to the abortion ban for rape and incest. Now, Democrats have made it clear they're not going to support that, so why introduce it now when you know it won't get bipartisan support?
Well, I think that it's important for voters to understand where most Republicans are at on this issue. I have to give the Democrats some credit over the last year and a half or so. They have done a very good job of mischaracterizing Republicans' position on this issue, but they do that to hide their own extreme positions on this issue, and that's why they try and make us look like the extremists. The governor and many people in his party, they want no restrictions on abortion whatsoever, and that's not really where the people of this state are at. I think that we have a very reasonable position to have exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. That's been my position for a decade or more. That's been the position of most Republicans in our caucus, most people that I talk to out on the campaign trail. That's what they believe. And so for the governor to come out and just unilaterally say that he would veto such a bill, I think is really irresponsible. This issue takes leadership. The governor is not providing it. He should be negotiating with us what that looks like. And unfortunately, he's chosen to just maintain his extreme position on this issue, and that's really unfortunate for the people of the state.
Speaker Voss has said he wants that bill to get onto the desk of Governor Evers, force him to veto it. But Devin LeMahieu, the Senate Majority Leader, has said they're not even going to take it up in the Senate. Is there a disconnect here between the two chambers with the Republican leaders?
Well, I'll be honest, I haven't talked to Devin about this specifically. I know he's still talking with his caucus on this issue. We're still talking with our caucus on this. I think that the vast majority of Republicans would support this legislation statewide. I think it's a reasonable place for us to be. I'm a co-sponsor of the legislation because that's been my position for over a decade. And we'll continue talking with the Senate Majority Leader and the Speaker, and I'm hopeful that we can get to a place where we can get a bill to the governor's desk.
All right, there were several bills that involved crime, stiffer criminal penalties here that were talked about this week, pushed on the Republican side. Why this push right now? Is there any tie to the fact that we have a very important election coming up in 2 weeks?
Well, I think that the reason to do it right now is we have a serious crime problem, especially over in the Milwaukee area. I think Representative Bob Donovan, who's one of our freshmen, everybody in the Milwaukee area knows Bob Donovan and his stances on crimes. And he brought forth especially this reckless driving situation. I mean, his two reckless driving bills got broad bipartisan support. I'm hopeful that the governor will sign them. He's indicated that he is open to signing them. So I think that is important because we've had these issues continue to get worse and worse. You have the carjackings, the stolen cars in Milwaukee. We need to make sure that people feel safe visiting downtown Milwaukee. It is the economic engine of our state as our largest city. So I think the sooner we can get these bills done, the better, and that's why we brought them up when we did.
There is also a proposed amendment on the ballot here this week, coming up in a couple of weeks, that's going to talk about cash bail. It would make it harder to get cash bail for violent criminals. On the other side, the Democrats have said that this is just going to cause more economic inequity. People who can't pay are going to end up in jail. The wealthy are going to be able to still buy their way out on bail. What is your response?
Well, the response is it's not all Democrats that oppose it, actually. This is one of those things that has had bipartisan support. I actually think that this bail amendment on the 4th is going to pass overwhelmingly. I think that it is a reasonable position for judges to be able to take a look at a criminal past of someone who's being held to determine the appropriate level of bail, if any. And that will be up to the judges to decide. They'll still have the ability to take all those other things into consideration that they currently can. This just adds one more thing that they can look at the criminal history and take a look at what the real danger to the community might be if this person was to be let out on bail at all, or what appropriate level of cash bail there would be.
Well, I know it's been a busy week for you. We appreciate the time here this week.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.